Okay, so I'm going to record this lecture for like the fourth time. I just recorded a 20 plus minute lecture on R Markdown without my microphone on. So it's just music. So, all right, here we go. Fourth time's the charm. So, today we're going to take a little tangent. We're going to work on R Markdown. And so, what R Markdown is it's kind of a way to make reports by kind of integrating R codes or R scripts in Word documents together, essentially. And so it's a real nice way to publish reports, to give reports to, people that you want to explain your science to, etc. So without getting too much into it. All right, so first thing we're going to do, for me, the fourth thing we're going to do, or much more than that because I've been doing this multiple times, we're going to install R Markdown. So we're going to type in install packages. So it pops up right here. And in quotations, we're going to type R and then Markdown. And we're going to just hit enter, run that. It says that we have stuff loaded, so we want to restart R prior to this. Don't restart RStudio, just restart. Hit yes. So down here at the bottom in the console, it'll restart R. It doesn't get rid of any of this or anything. It just behind the scenes it restarts R. So it's going through here. It's kind of giving me some warnings. As long as it says package successfully unpacked, you're good. It might say, oh, you need this for this package for R to install. For example, this isn't one. This is one we're going to do in the next lecture. But say it says you're missing dplyr. I'm going to do install packages, and then I'm going to put dplyr if it's one I'm missing, and install that. I'll just install it now for the heck of it. And then I would go back and install R Markdown. If you have that error come up, oh, I picked a package that's probably huge. So it's gonna, oh, there we go. Well, this will be installed for next lecture. But yeah, so if you have that issue, it is likely because you're missing one other package. But it should, Pandoc is one that can be missing, but RStudio is supposed to have Pandoc built in. So hopefully you have the most up-to-date Pandoc release, and that shouldn't be a problem. So while this is installing down here, I'm going to go up to the top here, and I'm going to pick R Markdown. So we're going to make a new R Markdown file, and I'm going to title it R Bioinformatics Handbook. And the author you can enter as yourself. And you know that there's 3 default outputs. You could also do presentations and Shiny apps, which makes like a nice little web app if you've got like a cool data set. HTML, if you run it, it'll open it in your browser. PDF, hopefully you know what a PDF is in a Word document. I like PDFs because it is, Word documents sometimes formatting can make it get like smushed around or moved around, and it just doesn't look as nice as a PDF. So I'm going to click OK. There we go. And so up here we have what's called the YAML, and this is just kind of the information of the document. So we have their title, the author is me, today's date, and it's a PDF document. It'll print these things on there for you, so you know when you generated your reports. And so the way Markdown works is kind of the opposite of how our R scripts work. And remember, in our R scripts, if we wanted to annotate it and write like sentences, we had to put a hashtag to tell our don't interpret this as R code. But in RStudio, if we type something here at the top, then it's going to automatically just treat it as text, and then we have to tell it when code needs to be interpreted. So we'll do some examples. So I'm going to use our previous our coursework that we've been doing throughout this course. And so the first thing I'm going to do is we're just going to take some of these simple operations. So let's take these first 3 lines that we did in our first lecture, and I'm going to paste it here. I'm going to just delete all this. This is just kind of a template to help you, but we don't need that. So I am going to get rid of that hashtag because we don't need it. So this is this text isn't going to be evaluated as an R code because, like I said, it's kind of the reverse. But I'm going to put a kind of a title for this section. I'm going to call this Simple Math. And now this 14 plus 7, though, I want that to be R code. I want R to interpret that for me. So what I do is I hit 3 of these tildes. They're at the top left of your keyboard under the escape button. And then I hit a squiggly bracket, not like a solid bracket, but the squiggly one. And I type R. And as you can see in RStudio, it's changed the color of my kind of background here. And that's telling me, okay, everything below here now, R thinks is R code. So what if I want to add more text? Well, to close it out, we just hit that tilde 3 times. And now we know that that is a chunk of R code. And so I'm going to delete that hashtags. Remember, we don't need them. And now I want this next part to be our second R code. So I'm going to hit 3 of those tildes, R, enter, and 3 to close it out. And then I'm going to do this for our last example here. 3 tildes, R. What did I do? Oh, see, I did the wrong bracket to close, and so it didn't give me the right, or recognize it as R code. Okay, so now we have 3 chunks of R code, and they're called chunks. So previously, when we wanted to run something, we'd go on the line and hit run or hit enter. But we can actually run individual chunks just by coming over to the right-hand side here, and it says run current chunk. So we run it, and it gives us our printout and says, okay, 7 plus 14 is 21. We can also name each chunk. So we're going to name this addition. You just have to have a space in between the R and what you want to name it. And we're going to name this multiplication. And we're going to name this, I guess, complex, because it's a bunch of stuff going on. Complex. Okay. So now let's keep going on, and let's pick some more stuff to put from our previous thing. Our previous document. Come on, glitchy RStudio. Let's do the heat shock proteins that we talked about previously. Okay, so lists and data frames. So let's take just this section and put it into our R code. I'm going to get rid of this because this is just the title. But now we have R code. So I want to put those 3 tildes. And I'm going to say this was data frames. And then I'm going to get rid of, oh no, I don't need to get rid of anything here. Then I'm going to close it out. And so we have this chunk now. And then lastly, let's throw some of, or let's do 2 more. Let's do the models and formulas. Paste that guy in there. And then we're going to say models. And then 1 more. Oops. See, if you don't put 3, it's not going to recognize it. So you get that. And then we're going to put in our charts and graphs. Okay. And I'm actually going to move that right there. Get rid of the hashtag. Okay. And so I'm going to say call this chunk graphs. Okay. I'm going to remove this. Remember, this was how we looked up help. I don't need that in my report. I don't think it would be very beneficial. So we had one for histogram here too. So let's get rid of that guy. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the top and I'm going to go to this knit button and I'm going to do knit PDF. And I got to save it. And I'm just going to say R Bioinformatics Handbook. Save. Okay, so you can see we have a new tab down here, and this is the Markdown tab. As you can see, it's going through each chunk and telling you how much percentage of the entire document has been completed, and it tells you, what chunks being generated at what time. So it'll take a second or two to actually create the PDF document. But when we do have it, you can see it makes this kind of nice figure here, or nice document where we have our title of our document, the author, the date that the document was generated, and you can see here we have our text explaining what we're going to do. The gray area here is our code that was evaluated in those in these brackets, and then we have our output from the console. And so you can see the potential here to make these nice, reports that you can give to people and kind of see what's going on. Well, you notice also, so for our models and formulas, we had it print out that iris data set where we had the head, and then we printed out the entire thing, and it took pages, three pages of space. So sometimes something like that might not be desirable, and we'll fix that in a second. The other thing, we have here's our output for our statistics from our linear model that we made. And then we have these graphs that are just nicely integrated into this PDF document. So I'm gonna close that out quick. Now, remember in our models and formulas, we had an issue with printing out too much stuff. We don't want 150 lines of that. So one argument you can put here is eval, and we can say true or false. So generally I would stick that this data set call to print the whole data set in its own chunk and then turn it off. I'm just going to turn this all off. Actually, no. Let's, yeah, I'm just going to turn it all off. So you can turn the eval equals false, and that will mean that when it makes this Markdown file, it will actually not even evaluate this. It won't incorporate it. It'll skip over it. So if you're working on, building a pipeline or something, and you want to give someone a report, but you don't want to delete the code, you can just turn eval on to false. It'll skip that part, and you can save it to work on later. So it's kind of a nice option. The other one that's important is echo. And so I'm going to turn echo to false. And changing echo to false, what that does, make sure you capitalize it all the way, is that means that it's going to print out all of the results, but it's not going to include any of the R code. And so that's nice. If you're giving a report to someone that doesn't know R, having all that R code in there, it just makes it confusing. So I'm going to turn that off for just the graphs as an example. The last thing is, and I'll show you some of these other things, other editing options with R in a minute, but if you want to create headers, what you can do is using hashtags outside of the R codes allows you to change the font size, right? And so if I put a hashtag in a space and then whatever text I want, you see it turns black. That means it's become a header or changed font size. And a single hashtag's the largest. And as you add more, it gets smaller and smaller. So I am going to knit this to PDF. Let's see how it looks now. Okay, so as you can see, we have our large header here, a smaller header, then an even smaller header, and they're bolded. We previously had the models and formulas here, and it was printing out the output. You'll notice if you turn eval off that it doesn't get rid of the R code, it just gets rid of the printout or what the results of the R code. So we still have it in here. So if we wanted it to not print the results and not print the R code, we'd have to say eval equals false and echo equals false. But now if we go down to charts and graphs where we turned off the echo, what happens is we have no R code, but we have the results of all those graphs. So you see we just have on each page a nice graph. So if you were to give this to a collaborator or someone else you're making this report for, they'd probably rather see this and maybe add some text to each one to describe what it is. They'd rather see this than all this stuff that doesn't make any sense to them. So before we end, there is, if you go to R Markdown, or rmarkdown.rstudio.com, there is this kind of like helpful reference for this R Markdown syntax. So let's see, let's go. If you go to R Markdown lesson 1, it shows you kind of how code chunks work, and even more complex things that we didn't get into, like you can make really nice tables like this, etc. So there's a lot. You can make slideshows, which is kind of cool. So there's a whole lot you can do to make really, really nice, like professional looking reports. And the last thing is we're going to look up this R Markdown cheat sheet. And so also in RStudio, we have this nice cheat sheet here. It's just 2-page PDF that shows you a lot of kind of simpler things that you can do in Markdown to kind of make your document nice and professional looking. So here it shows you kind of the syntax for like plain text just shows up like this. If you want to start a new paragraph, you underline the 2 spaces. You can italicize and bold. Here's how our headers worked. So remember, 1 hashtag and then a space, and then whatever your text is will make the biggest header. You can go down all the way to 6 hashtags to make little tiny headers. You can make nice inline equations like you see in the textbook where they're all italicized and set apart by typing inline equation : and then whatever your equation is. You can include images. You can kind of, here's the table example again, you can kind of make like lists or bullet points. And then down here, we have the things that I talked about before. So eval, if you want your code to include the results, you turn that to false. Echo will show the R code or not. And if you turn it to false, it'll just show the results without the R code. Sometimes if you get an error or a warning in your R package or your code, you can turn those off because those will get printed out too. And tidy is a nice one that I didn't show you. So what tidy does is, if you notice in our R code, we have this line here, and this is kind of the border of what would be on a piece of paper. And so if you go crazy long with an equation, it will just run off the end of the document and you won't be able to see half of it. So if you turn tidy on for that code chunk, what it's going to do is it is going to kind of be like justified or fit all of that code into the paper. So it's going to move it to the next line and stuff like that. When you print figures, you can in that R bracket area, you can say how big you want your plots to be, or how wide and how tall, etc. So this is just kind of a primer. Like I said, you can make really nice looking documents, very impressive. I remember when I first made one of these, well, not the first time I made it, but I was working with a collaborator And I sent them an R Markdown report like this, and they're like, "Holy cow! How did you make this? It looks like it's like the R professional documentation, or the stuff like when you look up how to use a R package, they use these Markdown files, and so it looks very professional." And I said, "Oh, I'll have to direct them to the video now and say, just go watch my video now." But they were very impressed. And this is somebody that does bioinformatics. So you can be very impressive to people if you use this. So I've been rambling long enough. And like I said, this is my fourth try in this video. And so I'm going to cut it off here. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, give me a thumbs up. Help this get visible and out to the masses on YouTube, because I'm trying to just educate people. And hopefully you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.